more money than Romney. But you can't accuse him of being a rich guy because he'll sit you down and explain he's even richer than you thought. It really doesn't work. And then the left pulls out its, I call it, it's sort of its master card. And this card is essentially, you have people who live the most sick and depraved and ruthless lives, who realize that they can get the Republicans on the issue of hypocrisy. If they can find a Republican who's flawed at all, they know that because the Republicans are the party of decency, if they can push this guy out forward, the Republicans themselves will pull out their long knives and kill him. And that was the whole point of Stormy Daniels. Sort of like, hey, Mr. Trump, what do you think of this? Stormy Daniels. Here's Trump. What else you got? Now, I mentioned Trump's flaws, and one of his flaws, let's be honest about it, the man does have a rather healthy ego. One might even say he has a Himalayan ego. In my movie, I morphed the heads of Lincoln and Trump, and some conservatives were a little outraged. They're like, Dinesh, be serious. This is ridiculous. How can you possibly compare one of the same screen, Trump and Lincoln? Interestingly, I think that this outrage was somewhat shared by Trump, but from the other direction. Dinesh, come on, man. Lincoln was okay. And yet, notice how this human vice becomes a political virtue, because in this environment where Trump is savage every second of every day on every platform, at every not just by baby-faced Jim Acosta, but he's savage by every late-night comedian. He's savage on the Emmys, and your own party is attacking you at the same. So in this situation, it kind of helps to have this insulating ego that allows you to push forward. And here's another one of Trump's noted vices. If someone attacks him, no matter how picayune or irrelevant or out there, he has an emotional need to attack them back. He totally has to do it. He can't resist. Now, admittedly, this is not a lesson that we try to impart to our children. We try to convince them to have self-control, restraint, pick your battles. And yet, again, this undeniable human vice is, in this transformed and abnormal situation, a virtue. Because with all the limps and invertebrates that Republicans have on our side, we can certainly use a guy who knows how to fight back. Now, you're walking away from one thing. A thing that hasn't really worked. A thing that has actually bared its ugly face, shown ultimately it's the party of corruption and theft. But what are we walking to? What are the principles we are embracing? Which is another way of asking, what does it mean to be a conservative today? And what do we say to the so-called never Trump people? I mean, we don't have to say a whole lot to them. Normally, ridicule will do. But in kinder moments, it's good to have something to say. And what they say to them is, hey, what happened in the Reagan era of gentlemen's politics? Why can't we have see, that's something I want too. But it's the greatest of foolishness not to recognize that we don't live in that America now. And Trump didn't create that situation, it created him. When Lincoln was first elected in 1860, he was literally surrounded by what can be called the rhinos of 1860, who said to Lincoln, "There's trouble ahead, you have to now abandon the Republican platform of 1860. And Lincoln was like, "What do you mean?" And they were like, "The Republican Party has campaigned on stopping the spread of slavery. We have to let that go. What we have to do now is take the Mason-Dixon line, the Missouri Compromise line, and push it all the way to California. North of that line, no slavery. South of that line, slavery forever." This was called the Crittenden Compromise, and it was presented as a proposal to avert the Civil War. And had Lincoln agreed to it, there probably would not have been a Civil War, but slavery would have been embedded into the United States forever. In fact, Lincoln refused to go along. And Lincoln said, in effect, "I will suffer death," which is our way of saying, "over my dead body." And what Lincoln said is, "We just had an election. We put this exact issue before the American people. The American people, through an electoral majority, decided. It is a mandate, but it's not my mandate, it's their mandate. Our job is now to carry it out." Carry it out. And a year or two later, when the Union Army, for the first time, deployed black soldiers, black Union soldiers, it became Confederate policy that for every black Union soldier captured, he would be immediately executed. This was not done to white soldiers who were normal prisoners of war. And when this came across Lincoln's desk, he issued an executive order that in my mind is the most severe, arguably the most barbaric, on the northern side. For every black Union soldier executed by the Confederacy, one Confederate captive will be shot. Now, why would a moderate man like Lincoln issue an order of such obvious severity? The answer is that Lincoln realized that in a bad situation, if you don't do to them what they're doing to you, there's no way to make them stop. No way. And in fact, the Confederates did stop, and Lincoln withdrew the order. So this is a way of saying that it is the greatest of foolishness not to recognize that the Democratic Party has become gangsterized in the past decade. It's not Jimmy Carter's party anymore. If we were awarding a prize for presidential nincompoopery, I think it still goes to Carter. The actions of the Carter administration were inept, but not malevolent. Jimmy Carter thought he was doing a great thing when he pulled the Persian rug out from under the shop. And oops, he got Khomeini. So from the frying pan into the fire. But Carter didn't know that. He didn't anticipate it. He wasn't trying to install radical Islam in Iran. He just didn't really know what he was doing. This is not the same as Obama and Hillary. In my own little case, when I was up before the federal government, this is the Holder Justice Department, they were like, "Did you exceed the campaign finance law?" I said, "I inadvertently did. I was trying to help a college friend, but yes, I did exceed the law, and I should get the same penalty as anybody else who did the same thing." And then they were like, "Not so fast." And I realized that the plot thickens. So then they go, "We're going to get you for bank fraud." I go, "Bank fraud?" They go, "Yeah, because you withdrew your money from the bank." And I go, Then they say, "We're also going to get you for mail fraud." I go, "Mail fraud?" They go, "Yeah, because you put the check in the mail." And then I realized what was going on. They were taking what I did, re-describing the same action 10 different ways, drawing on the wide federal accordion of ways to put those people off the street, and they were using these laws against me. So then I realized that essentially what we have here is a party, the Democratic Party, that doesn't view its critics as misguided. It views them as enemies. I'm totally convinced that the Obama administration could figure out a way to lock me up for 10 years. They would be positively delighted to do it. Their idea was to take me out. And they didn't take me out, but they did sort of nick me. And happily, even that little injury was undone when I got this unexpected call from the White House. The White House operator was hold the line for the president. And here comes Trump, and I must say he was in a very Trumpian mood. He goes, "Hey Dinesh, how's it going?" He goes, I'm sitting here with John Kelly." He goes, "You know John Kelly, don't you?" I'm like, "I don't know John Kelly. I know who he is, but I don't know who got me." And he got right to the point. He goes, "Man, you got screwed." And as I heard him talk, I wasn't really listening to every word that he said, because I was sort of taking in the implications of it. And while through my mind's eye was passing this great, clearing of my record and disarming the left of its ability to call me a felon and giving me my American dream back, but beyond all that, I saw the full significance was that this single act was a giant up yours to the Obama administration. Jubilation of Walkaway has to be fortified by the calm conviction that this is a big and long-term fight. In fact, the political fight is a tiny corner of the battlefield. There's a much larger cultural battle going on. We won't compete effectively long-term if we don't break the left's virtual monopoly on elite academia, on the mainstream media. There are a lot of things that are not done on our side that make us very dependent on their side. We do very little investigative journalism, for example. There are just a handful of people on our side who are ferreting out facts. We rely on their facts. reformed Republican Party, transformed in large part by Trump, so we can then push on without him. There's a fantastic energy in the room. I think it bodes very well for the midterms. In the beginning of the Civil War, Lincoln's military advisor said to him that the South was fired up. And Lincoln's reply, I paraphrase, was, "We have to be just as fired up on our side," which is a hard thing to do. The South was fired up automatically because Union troops would be on Southern territory. It was harder to motivate the Union soldier than the Confederate soldier. Similarly, in the midterm, we know why they're fired up. They lack power, they're angry, they're desperate, and when you combine those things with the fact that they're vile, it's a potent combination. We have to be fired up too. And let's just say, thank God for all these vicious strikes that they attempted that failed. Have it on. Even this latest bomber, or perhaps I should say non-bomber, in all cases, you have a setup. And by a setup, all I mean is that this is a politically orchestrated event that is being played for political gain. The good news is we, who used to take it on the chin, are now getting smart. We're learning to decode the media, read between the lines, interpret what they're actually trying to say, and realize that much of what they call bad news is actually excellent news. And much of what they call good news is actually bad news that we've got to be alert for. So this decoding function, which I'm trying to extend to scholarship, when you're told a narrative, Trump is a fascist. Well, the idea that Trump is a fascist only works if fascism were on the right. And the idea that fascism is on the right long predates Trump. That idea was cooked up right after World War II. It was cooked up by a new generation of progressives who knew that fascism was on the left, but realized how politically damaging it would be if they put that into the textbooks. And so they said, let's redefine fascism. Let's move it into the right-wing column. Let's take the socialism out of National Socialism. Let's pretend that Hitler wasn't really a socialist. He didn't really campaign on a socialist platform. Let's ignore the fact that Mussolini was a lifelong socialist and a long-time Marxist. Let's suppress all that. We don't even want educated young people to know that. So this cookery of the books has been going on for a long time. And walking away isn't just embracing Trump, it's also recognizing that you have to reorganize the facts in your head. Put a new lens into the camera, look with a new skepticism at the things that are out, that are taught as things that people know. When I speak on campus, one of my biggest challenges is that young people, smart young people, know things that aren't true. But they know it with such brazen cockiness that they say things like, Dinesh, don't you realize that the racist Dixiecrats all became Republicans? And they say this with such conviction and such confidence, and I think to myself, you virtual moron. How did you become so sure about something that you can pull out your phone? You can, in 1 second, Google up the Dixiecrats. You can count in 5 seconds how many of them became Republicans, and yet you have the audacity to stand up in a public forum against someone who's much older and better educated than you and lecture him about how it feels. And I think to myself, how does someone get that way? And the answer is this. They get that way because of what can be called the ricochet effect. So a progressive academic writes a book that fascism is on the right, or writes a book about the big switch. And his like-minded faculty colleagues go, brilliant book, this settles the debate. And then the and pretty soon Michael Moore comes rolling in to make a documentary. And then the History Channel is interested. Steven Spielberg puts an episode in his. So here's my point. The ordinary intelligent guy goes, oh yeah, that's gotta be true. My professor said something. I was in Barnes & Noble. I saw it over there. I turned on NPR, and there it was. And there I type into Wikipedia, and there it is. And so the fact that the same bullet is ricocheting on one wall to the next wall to the next wall, this guy thinks he's getting corroborating evidence. This almost reminds me of Susan Blasey Ford. I told my husband, I told my best friend. But that's not external corroboration. That's just you repeating yourself all over again. And similarly here, you have the same fact coming back at you, but people think it's got to be true. I've gotten all the corroboration I wanted. So changing people's minds from the inside out, that's a longer-term task. And that's one, but it's a local task, because ultimately it puts conservatism on the side of truth, skepticism, open inquiry, fairness. At the end of the day, our platform is actually very moderate. What we are conserving is nothing more than liberalism itself, the classical liberalism of the American founding. Now, having said that, let me conclude with something that William F. Buckley said many years ago. He came to speak on the Dartmouth campus, and he raised the question of what does it mean to be a conservative in a liberal culture? Very interesting question, because normally a conservative conserves. But his point is, what if you happen to be in a culture whose assumptions are shaped and dominated and set by the left? Now what do? You conserve that, you'll be conserving progressivism. So what does a conservative do in that anomalous situation? And Buckley's answer was, you sort of have to stop being a conservative. By which he meant not relinquish your principles, but you remain a philosophical conservative, but temperamentally, you have to be a radical. You have to do things differently. You have a reigning, entrenched set of assumptions on a campus, for example. You have to find a way to shake those. And the normal conservative temperament doesn't really work. We've tried this normal conservative. Look at the court. Even before Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, the majority of nominees on the court are from our side. But we can't count on it. Now notice when the Democrats nominate someone to the court, they ask only one question. Is this person a completely reliable left-wing Democrat? That's the only question they ask. They want to count with Euclidean certainty on the 4 Democratic votes, and they can. They never deviate. On our side, we have all these external criteria. We want a candidate who has a deep love of reading. We want a candidate who is dedicated to the principles of the Constitution. We want a candidate who interprets the Constitution in the light of the original intentions of the people who wrote those documents. So here we are producing this unbelievable intellectual juggling, and then what we end up with is, how's Anthony Kennedy feeling today? Yay, we got Kennedy! Whoops, we lost Roberts. So what you see is that there's a disproportionate level of ideological commitment that the two sides are bringing to this fight. And this is also true generally. Antifa is roaming the campus. And by the way, in no way am I saying that because they beat up our speakers, we should beat up their speakers. Not at all. Here's what I am saying. We have to hold their side accountable. Because if Antifa can drive a speaker off the campus and intimidate the audience to cause the college to cancel the event, they count that as a win. And they will keep doing it as long as it works. A couple of years ago, Condoleezza Rice was offered a graduation degree in speech at Rutgers University. There was a ruckus on the campus. No way, she's setting one foot on the campus. And Condoleezza Rice, graceful, ladylike, withdrew, to which many conservatives applauded. What a beautiful display of ladylike believes the rights can't keep on campus, no conservative will set foot on that campus ever again. If she's unacceptable, who's acceptable? And so by playing along with this disgraceful charade, you actually strengthen the other side. You convince them, wow, that's the formula. That's how we take their side out. All we have to do is create a ruckus, and those people are such wimps that they will back off. This is really why the left was surprised by Trump. They expected him to act that way, and he refused to. He totally refused. So at the end of the day, I think Trump is a man of the hour.
Yes.
Just as General Grant was. And there were people who went to Lincoln, Republicans. General Grant is an alcoholic. General Grant has low moral character. General Grant bankrupted his father's store. To which Lincoln replied, yes, but he can fight. And that's the case for Trump. So welcome to the fight. Couldn't have been at a better time. We need you on our side. The Reagan legacy is actually being restored by a man who's very different than Reagan, but is moving those Reaganite principles forward in this moment and in this time. I think when we look back, we will see that it was a critical time, and by tragic necessity, the responsibility of fixing it falls on our shoulders, and I hope and I pray, but at the end of the day, I'm also confident that we are totally up to the task.